Bob Seeley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to follow the honourable member for Crewe Nantwich. Can I start by welcoming my honourable friend for Wealdon in her new role, and I wish her all the best. It's very good to see her there. I welcome this government's, Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I welcome the government's very considerable investment in our rail system. It is very good to see, and I support this government's ambitious railway agenda. There is lots of good things happening in our railway system. However, I do find it hard to believe that the £52 billion being spent on HS2 could not have been better spent more broadly across the system. I'm not opposing or voting against this because I think there is little point. HS2 is going to happen. However, I think it would have been significantly better for our economy to have prioritised HS3, which is a good idea and clearly important for the north of this country, and then, if HS2 was to be built, to have started in the north and worked south, and rather the other way around. What seems to be clear with HS2 is that it is extraordinarily expensive. There are poor returns, and by the government's own admission, 1 to 2.3 ratio of return is extremely poor. It does harm the environment. It seems to be a bit of a muddle in terms of, once we've got straight lines, we're going super fast, then we've got bends and we can't go super fast, then the stations don't quite integrate, and there does seem to be a problem with that integration up and down the network, which other people have rightly spoken about. However, my main concern is the cost to the other parts of the rail network. Again, people have spoken eloquently here about the need for greater capacity. This does nothing for capacity for Southern Rail or for South West Rail. South West Rail network is crying out for investment. We need rail flyovers at Woking and at Basingstoke to get more services on that line. We need to update the signalling system between Waterloo and Woking and eventually elsewhere in the line to improve speeds and services. We need infrastructure on the Portsmouth line, Madam Deputy Speaker, to increase capacity. Getting from London to Portsmouth, you travel at an average speed of around 45 miles an hour. And the idea that we're spending billions building a rail network to go super fast up north when we are still travelling at branch line speeds on mainline routes in the south of England, I think is very galling to many, many of our constituents across constituencies in southern England. We need also to double the track between Southampton and Basingstoke. And my right honourable friend talks about a bright new future for the railways. We don't see that on Southern, and we don't see it on South West Rail main lines. If I remember correctly, my right honourable friend, whose agenda I very strongly support, and I have high regard for him personally, has assured me that South West Rail projects are not affected by the HS2 project. So can he or she put on record confirming that HS2 has not delayed or has not affected the funding and the supply of South West Rail mainline improvements, but also Crossrail 2, which will benefit the users of South West Rail if they get off at Clapham or if they use Clapham?
Yes, certainly. For giving way. I agree, and I want to see benefits to my own connectivity in my constituency, including a new station in Corsham. But will the honourable member accept that this does benefit the UK as a whole in the form of jobs, like I said before, but also in the fact that we all have a wealth of SMEs in our constituencies whose supply chains and customers are based throughout the UK, and they can only benefit from this extra connectivity?
In principle, you make a very good point, and thank you for your intervention. The problem is, I go back to the profit ratio, or to the cost-benefit ratio. It is very, very difficult for any of us to go to a minister or government department and say, this is a fantastic project and it's got a ratio of 1.2 to 3, which is the government's own figures. We would get laughed at. To get a project off the ground, according to Green Book assessments, you need a ratio of 1.5 upwards and preferably 1 to 7. So 1 to 2.3 is a very poor return for government money by the government's own figures. Now, anything that helps within reason, expenditure and our economy is to be welcomed. But by the government's own figures, this cost-benefit is dubious. But thank you for the question, and thank you for the intervention. Moving back to the point, if there is no delay to South West Rail projects caused by HS2, will my right honourable friend commit to prioritising the necessary work on the South West Rail route that could speed up journey times between London and South Coast destinations such as Portsmouth, Southampton, Bournemouth and, yes, the Isle of Wight, my own constituency? And I know that my right honourable friend is a user of South West Rail and feels the pain of the 500,000 people who come in every day into Waterloo. And will my right honourable friend, he or she, consider setting Network Rail and the new franchise a target of a speed, a 60-minute service to Southampton and Portsmouth? We get 2 trains down the main line to Southampton an hour. They take about 1 hour 17 at the moment. If we are interested in high-speed rail, can we set a new target of getting people to Southampton, getting people to Portsmouth within the hour? In addition, I will be writing to my right honourable friend tomorrow in connection with the island. He has been kind enough to sound positive about the needs in my constituency for better public transport, especially since we get precious little infrastructure money. Now, in my letter, I will be asking about the programme of reopening branch lines and investment into Island Line. Early this month, the Isle of Wight Council voted to support a feasibility study into extending our branch line into possibly 2 directions, and working with our wonderful heritage line, the Haven Street Steam Railway, and getting them into Ryde, which will be very important for them. I'm going to cover in this letter support for investment, support for a feasibility study, and dependent on the results of that feasibility study, support for the branch line, and also capital work to be done on Ryde Pier Head to ensure that the railway line to on Ryde Pier Head stays feasible and continues and has a future. So I'm very supportive of my right honourable friend and his agenda, which is an excellent one. But will he assure me, considering that you're spending £52 billion on one line, that the DOT will not be telling me that you can't afford a feasibility study? And will my right honourable friend be telling me...
Order. If the honourable gentleman is referring to the Minister, he must say the Minister, not you. And I apologise for interrupting the honourable gentleman, but this is becoming a widespread habit of members all around the House, and it mustn't go on. And I'm sorry that the honourable gentleman is the person who is hearing this. I'm sure that other people will now be rather more careful. The honourable gentleman is not a consistent offender. He's normally very proper in his behaviour. Bob Seeley.
Thank you so much. And I do apologise. I noticed a few hues and I scrubbed them out and put he's and she's. So if I've still got a couple of you's in, I do apologise. And I tried to work out, because my honourable friend is not here, I didn't know if I should be using he's or she's, or if we've reached a post-gender age for ministers as well for the rest of us.
In order to help the honourable gentleman and the House, the word minister is really useful because it covers just about everything and anyone, no matter which gender they might be that particular day. Mr. Seeley.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much indeed. The Minister, and I will, on that point, I will wind up, so I take the right on the agenda. Right. I'm very supportive of the Minister's agenda, whichever one we're talking about. But will the Minister assure me, given that we are spending a great deal of money, that the DOT will not be telling me that a feasibility study is not feasible because of cost? And can the Minister assure me that a feasibility study, if it does recommend extension of our lines, will be supported, given that the costs involved, £10 to £30 million, are margins of error in government accounting in the Department of Transport? And will the Minister assure me that there will be support for infrastructure projects, both on South West Rail and also for the Island Line, notwithstanding the very considerable amounts of money that are being spent elsewhere? Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Christian Matheson.